Imagine one night fire falls from the sky. In seconds, centuries of history burn, crack, and fade away. They are not just stones. They are not just frescoes. They are pieces of civilization. Echoes of the past, that will never return. During World War II, while armies clashed and cities were reduced to rubble, another invisible front opened, that of culture. Amid smoke and death, a silent battle was also fought for the soul of the past. And Rome, the eternal city, watched as part of its oldest and most valuable legacy was swallowed by flames, by greed, or by the simple neglect of those who saw only military targets. Today we will tell you about 5 treasures of ancient Rome that were destroyed during World War II. Not to dwell in lamentation, but to remember. Because a people who forget their history is a people ready to lose it again. War has always been a destructive force. But in the 20th century, for the first time, the destruction was systematic, industrial, and blind. Not only did millions of people die, but also thousands of temples, sculptures, books, cities, memories. Italy was one of the most intense battlefields of the conflict, and its immense Roman heritage was exposed to Allied bombings, Nazi looting, fires, and ruthless military decisions. Many of the treasures we will see today survived for centuries, earthquakes, barbarian invasions, civil wars, but they did not withstand the 6 most brutal years of the last century. Sometimes, you don't need a sword to kill a civilization. A bomb is enough. Or a match. First treasure, the monumental Camposanto of Pisa. At first glance, the monumental Camposanto of Pisa might seem like just a cemetery. But in reality, it was a sanctuary of art, history, and spirituality. A sacred enclosure whose construction began in 1278 on soil brought from Golgotha itself, the hill where, according to Christian tradition, Jesus was crucified. Hence its name, Camposanto, a place literally made with holy earth. For centuries, its walls were decorated with more than 2,600 square meters of frescoes, an area even larger than that of the Sistine Chapel. Masterpieces like the Last Judgment, the Triumph of Death, and scenes from the Old Testament adorned its walls, turning it into a visual capsule of medieval and Renaissance thought. But nothing could save it from the fire of war. In 1944, during an Allied bombing aimed at destroying the railway junction of Pisa, a bomb hit the Camposanto. The fire lasted 3 days. The flames devoured roofs, sarcophagi, and centuries-old sculptures. The frescoes, painted in tempera on dry plaster, cracked, melted, and collapsed. That place, where the people of Pisa buried their great sages and artists, was reduced to charred rubble. Some pieces were saved thanks to the efforts of the U.S. Army and Italian restorers, but what was lost cannot be recovered. Today, visiting the Camposanto of Pisa is like looking at a restored body, without the original soul. A reminder that art does not always die of old age but sometimes is killed by hatred and gunpowder. Second treasure, the lost antiquities of the Berlin State Museums. Before bombs rained on Berlin, the German capital housed one of the most impressive classical art collections in the world. Roman sculptures, Greek sarcophagi, Etruscan jewels, religious friezes, and thousands of archaeological pieces were displayed in the famous Altas Museum and Pergamon Museum. The heart of that collection was the imposing Pergamon altar, brought from Turkey in the 19th century. But there were also hundreds of statues, vases, jewels, and reliefs from Rome and other ancient civilizations. For decades, this collection was enriched with acquisitions, excavations, and looting, especially during the 18th and 19th centuries. However, with the outbreak of World War II, everything changed. Germany tried to protect these jewels of history by wrapping them in sandbags, hiding them in basements, or moving them to underground mines. But the chaos of the war's final days was stronger than any security measure. Allied bombings destroyed entire parts of the museums. What was not destroyed by bombs was looted. Some objects disappeared under the rubble. Others were stolen by German soldiers themselves, and many more were captured by the Soviets, in what later would be called the Second Loot of Berlin. The list of losses is devastating: more than 300 marble statues, 5 large bronze statues, 100 ancient vases, 40 reliefs, and 150 engraved gems, among many other pieces. We are not talking about symbolic losses. We are talking about irreplaceable works. Fragments of humanity's history that burned among ruins or were ripped from their context forever. And so, Berlin, which was once a beacon of archaeological knowledge, became a cemetery of treasures mutilated by war. Third treasure, the Cocceio Tunnel, Agrippa's underground masterpiece. Imagine being in 38 BC. Octavian, Julius Caesar's heir, is preparing to consolidate his power. His right hand, Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, a brilliant engineer and general, plans a strategic military port on Lake Avernus near Naples. But to connect the lake with the ancient city of Cumae, he does something unthinkable. He builds a tunnel nearly a kilometer long, carved into the volcanic rock of Monte Grillo. The Cocceio Tunnel, also called the Grotta di Cocceio, was a feat of Roman engineering. It was not only wide enough to allow 2 carts to pass side by side, but its interior was decorated with niches, statues, and a colonnade. 6 vertical shafts allowed light and air to circulate through this unprecedented underground structure. In parallel, the Aqua Augusta aqueduct was built, running along the northern side of the tunnel to supply water to the new military port. The entire structure was designed by Lucius Cocceius Auctus, the same architect who built the first Pantheon in Rome. For centuries, this underground marvel served not only military purposes but also as a commercial and strategic passage. Later, it became known as the Grotta della Pace, named after a Spanish captain who used it to plunder ruins in the 16th century. Then came World War II. During Allied bombings, the tunnel suffered severe damage. Although it survived centuries of use, modern war showed no mercy. Explosions caused collapses in its structure, and part of its architectural legacy was reduced to ruins. It was closed to the public and forgotten for decades. When restoration work finally began, a new unexpected obstacle emerged. 5 species of bats protected by Italian law had made the tunnel their home. Work was halted, and the Cocceio Tunnel, this lost gem of the Roman Republic, remained silent underground, guarded by shadows and the echo of what was once Agrippa's genius. Fourth treasure, the Nemi Ships, Caligula's floating palaces that ended in ashes. In the calm waters of Lake Nemi, just 30 kilometers from Rome, Emperor Caligula ordered the construction of 2 colossal ships that defied all logic. Why would he need vessels over 70 meters long on a volcanic lake less than 2 square kilometers in area? The answer remains a mystery, but what we do know is that these ships were genuine floating palaces. One of the ships was decorated with marble, mosaics, columns, and gilded copper roofs. It had plumbing, heating, and ornamental floors, as if it were an imperial villa sailing on the waters of a sacred place. The other, smaller ship, had no visible means of propulsion, suggesting it was towed. Lost for centuries, the ships were rediscovered in the 15th century, but it wasn't until 1932, thanks to orders from Benito Mussolini, that they were salvaged. The lake was completely drained through an ancient Roman tunnel, and the gigantic vessels emerged from the depths as relics of a golden era. The Nemi Museum was specially built to house them. There they rested intact, rescued from the waters, until war caught up with them. On May 31, 1944, during a U.S. air raid on a nearby German position, the Nazi soldiers guarding the museum withdrew. Shortly after, locals saw smoke rising from the building. What happened that night is still debated. Some accuse the Germans of deliberately setting fire to the museum before fleeing, others blame the Allied bombings. What is certain is that the ships were completely destroyed by the flames. Only a few charred beams, marble fragments, and some bronzes survived. Over 1,000 years of history annihilated in a single night. In 2020, Nemi's mayor, Alberto Bertucci, demanded compensation from Germany, claiming the destruction was intentional and not a result of combat. The damage was irreparable, and what was once Caligula's eccentric luxury now lives only in photographs, archaeological reports, and burnt memories. Fifth treasure, the $34.99 Roman bust, the ancient sculpture that ended up in a second-hand store. In August 2018, Laura Young, an antiques dealer in Texas, walked into a Goodwill thrift store in Austin without realizing she was about to find one of the most puzzling treasures of modern history. Under a dusty table, she found a marble bust weighing about 23 kilos. Its elegance and the realism of its features caught her attention. The price, $34.99. Unknowingly, she had purchased an original ancient Roman sculpture, possibly from the 1st century, linked to the Julio-Claudian dynasty. Experts believe the bust could represent Sextus Pompey, son of the famous general Pompey the Great, or Drusus Germanicus, younger brother of Emperor Tiberius. Investigations revealed that this millennial artwork was part of the Pompejanum collection, a Roman villa built in the 19th century on the banks of the Main River in Germany by King Ludwig I of Bavaria. During World War II, the building was bombed and looted, and many of its objects, including this bust, disappeared without a trace. No one knows how the sculpture made its way to the United States. It is presumed that a U.S. soldier looted it during the conflict or acquired it from someone who did, and that it was anonymously donated to the Goodwill store. The establishment had no record of who delivered it. Upon discovering the truth, Laura consulted specialists at the San Antonio Museum, who confirmed its authenticity. However, her lawyer warned her that she could not sell it since it was stolen property and international laws prohibit profiting from looted cultural heritage. Thus, a negotiation process began with Germany, which accepted its return but under the condition that it be first exhibited in a Texas museum as recognition of the find. In this way, a simple walk through a second-hand store ended up revealing a story that connected Rome's imperial past with the ravages of World War II and the randomness of modern life. A bust that survived emperors, wars, and lootings, only to resurface with a price tag under $35. Pompeii, between ashes and unexploded bombs. Pompeii, the Roman city frozen in time after the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD, is one of the world's most valuable archaeological sites. But what few know is that this sanctuary of the past hides an invisible danger: unexploded bombs dropped during World War II. In 1943, Allied intelligence reported that German troops had established a military base on the archaeological site. In response, the Allied Air Force carried out 9 air raids, dropping 165 bombs over the area. The information was incorrect. There were only 2 anti-aircraft guns and some trucks. Still, the damage was done. Many bombs exploded, but an estimated 10% did not. Some remained buried beneath layers of volcanic ash and soil. Decades later, archaeologists have found several of these intact devices. Anthony de Simone, an archaeologist who worked at Pompeii in 1986, recounted how a routine excavation revealed, just a few centimeters away, an unexploded bomb. One had already exploded, but the other was perfectly intact, he recalled. In 2019, it was estimated that between 7 and 10 unexploded bombs still remain scattered across the 22 hectares of the site yet to be excavated. The process to locate them is slow, meticulous, and costly. Military engineers advance meter by meter using magnetometers, in procedures that often clash with traditional archaeological techniques for being more invasive. Despite the risk, authorities assure that tourists and workers are safe. Each area excavated is previously analyzed and cleared by specialized teams. Still, the idea that Pompeii's history is not only a volcanic tragedy but also a war legacy is striking. Italy in general is riddled with unexploded bombs from World War II. It is estimated that only 60% of the explosive devices dropped on the country have been found. Pompeii, silent and buried by the eruption, now also holds hidden echoes of the most devastating conflict of the 20th century. Treasures that fire could not erase from the human soul. Sometimes we believe history is written only in books, but true history lies in the scars that time, war, and oblivion leave on stone, marble, and collective memory. These 5 treasures of ancient Rome were not only works of art or engineering, they were silent witnesses to the splendor of a civilization that forever shaped the destiny of the world. And although many were consumed by flames, bombings, or the greed of looters, their legacy remains alive, because you are here remembering them. Today more than ever, understanding what was lost is valuing what we still have. If this video made you think, subscribe to keep exploring the wonders, mysteries, and tragedies of our past. Share this video with those who love history and leave your comment. Which of these treasures impacted you the most? Which do you think we should have never lost? Because a people who do not know their history are condemned to repeat it.